So, as KwaZulu-Natal counts the cost again of heavy rains in the area, it's becoming obvious that as a country, as a Southern African region, we need to start to build our country, our region, in a way that it can withstand huge storms and droughts. Both our Environmental Affairs Minister, Barbara Creecy, and our Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, said last week that they believe climate change and the reaction to it could be the biggest problems we face because of the storms and the droughts that it creates. Dr Olasunkanmi Habeeb Okunola is a postdoctoral fellow at the Global Change Institute at Wits University. Dr Okunola, good afternoon to you and thank you for your time. When we see the kind of storms that we saw in Durban last month, the damage that they caused, when we've seen what happens around a changing climate in Southern Africa, what does that tell us about how we have to change, how we have to plan and build our cities in a different way?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Based on what most scientists are saying, we are already experiencing climate change with severe consequences on vulnerable communities, ecosystem, livelihood, and critical infrastructure. And this is further compounded by poor or bad drainage systems, badly constructed houses. And this has led to frequent and severe flooding events that we are currently experiencing. The typical example is that of Durban, which killed several people. And the problem with this is that most reaction so far has been, most flood risk management approach so far has been reactive. What do I mean? It has been reactionary approach towards effective flood management in some African cities, including that of South Africa. So we need to engage more in risk reduction activities by assessing the vulnerability of people and the communities that are affected, and engage in serious campaign or rigorous awareness from people. Starting from communities to various schools, so that people will know the risks that are associated with some of these frequent flooding. And as a result, we need a kind of collaborative effort to ensure that all the stakeholders are involved in towards risk reduction practices in Southern Africa.
So, one example that comes to mind when you talk in that way is to talk about, for example, people who build shacks. They live in informal settlements next to rivers in KwaZulu-Natal. There's you need to explain to them why it's dangerous to live there, and then you need to help them live somewhere else. Is that the kind of approach you're talking about, to make sure that people live in safer areas?
Not exactly, because unfortunately, that is the reality of life. We cannot send them away, but government need to work with them to ensure that they build a kind of resilient facilities for them, because some of those people are getting their means of livelihood there. So it is going to be difficult to send them away. So we must embrace the resilience. We must prepare the people, and the people must work with the government to ensure that the shanks that have been built are translated to resilient structures that will resist any impact of flood.
All of this means that it's going to cost a lot more money, isn't it? There's no way around that. We're going to have to build better. We're going to have to build in a way that's going to be more expensive.
Yes, but we cannot also afford to. The question is, where do we send them? Where do we send people that are living in some of these informal settlements? So we are between a hard place and a hard rock. So there are two pleasant and unpleasant options that are at our hands. So, but I think the most sustainable and the most effective is to collaborate with some of these people and build safe and sufficient structures for them.
Cities are supposed to plan for the longer term. So, for example, in places in Canada, we'll build below what's called a 50-year freezing line. In other words, they will build a pipe 12 feet underground because the last time it froze at that depth was 50 years ago. In South Africa, we are now clearly in places like KZN, perhaps in Cape Town and other places, we're going to have to build on a sort of 50 or 100-year floodline. Now, we might have thought that certain floods would only happen once every 100 years. If we look at climate change, they're going to happen once every 20 years or once every 10 years. That means that if we need to plan for extreme weather events, we need to have extreme planning. I mean, this could change the shape of a city.
Yes, you're absolutely right. That was part of what I said during the introductory comment I made. That we need to embark on risk reduction approach. We need to plan ahead. But the problem has been that we adopt reactive approach. Take, for instance, the national government are embarking on response and later on recovery process. This shouldn't always be, though there is no way we can prevent flood from occurring, but government needs to do more by planning ahead. Do a kind of vulnerability assessment to know the communities or the people that are likely to be affected by frequent flooding. And based on what scientists are saying, we might even experience more frequent flooding in the future. So we must start the action now. We must start preparing now. We must have a kind of effective preparedness and mitigation measures to actually reduce frequent flood in Southern Africa.
You and I have been talking about flooding and big storms for the last few minutes, and I understand why. But the other big thing that's going to come is drought. I mean, cities like Johannesburg, not on the coast, could easily have major droughts in the next few years because of climate change. Cities will need to plan for that too.
Of course, we need to plan for that as well, because the issue of climate change is a global phenomenon, which is not only peculiar to Southern Africa alone. So it is something that is being experienced all over the world. So there is need to embark on mitigative measures and preparedness measures. So more needs to be done in terms of water management, because, of course, there is every tendency based on various models that have been predicted by scientists that we are going to experience more in the future. So we need to embark on such a risk reduction approach right now. And this cannot only be achieved by government. Government needs to work with civil society organizations as well as community groups to ensure that we are well prepared for frequent or imminent drought that has been predicted by scientists.
I sort of feel in South Africa, Dr. Okunola, that until maybe 3 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, we didn't talk about climate change much. It wasn't a big political issue. It's becoming a big political issue now. Do you think people are beginning to understand how serious this is? They're beginning to demand that their politicians act?
Yes, so it has become a big political issue because people are now seeing the impact. Take, for instance, there was a huge flood event in KZN in 2019, and what has happened in April last month, to be precise, has made people to be more aware of these the various consequences of climate change. So more reasons why people are demanding more from national government to do more, to invest more on climate change adaptation measures. So there's more awareness. People are seeing it now. So it is more than theoretical now. People are seeing the effect. They are feeling the impact. Imagine we are talking about almost 500 people that lost their life as a result of climate change related extreme events last month. People are seeing the impact now. More reasons why they are demanding more actions from various levels of government.
Doctor, I really appreciate the time. Thank you. Dr. Olasunkanmi Habeeb Okunola is at the Global Change Institute at Wits University. In a moment, back to the South African Federation of Trade Unions Elective Congress, where I understand the trade union NUMSA, the biggest